Welcome back. So this past weekend we had the Bahrain Grand Prix, the first race of the Formula One season. So today I just wanted to give my power rankings for the first race of the season. I'll be doing this after every race this season, and it'll be kind of an average of the most recent races. So number 20, Esteban Ocon. So for Ocon, really good qualifying, got into Q3. Race I thought was really poor, just lots of little mistakes here and there that kind of ruined his race. He had the start box infringement, which I think unfortunately is on him, and then of course he also got the penalty for speeding in the pit lane, and his race was basically ruined because of that. So not a great weekend from Ocon on a weekend where I think the car could have gotten a couple points. Number 19th, Zhou Guangyu. So for Zhou, pretty decent qualifying, was very close to Bottas, still qualified. Race I thought was pretty poor though. Bottas showed that the car was capable of getting some points, and Zhou was basically just stuck kind of in the midfield, miles off. I think he went for a late stop for fastest lap, which is why he was so far down on the final classification, but still not great. Number 18, Nick De Vries. So for De Vries, qualified 19th, really far off his teammate in qualifying, and in the race was close but still not great, and he was of course unfortunately ruined by that terrible strategy at the end to stay out on hards when everyone else around him switched to softs at the end with the late VSC. Number 17, Oscar Piastri. So for Piastri, not a lot to say. Got out-qualified by quite a big margin by his teammate Lando Norris. However, Norris is a very good driver, so that's to be expected, and it's his first race. In the race, he started making up positions, looked good, didn't make any big mistakes, and then reliability problem. So 17th for Piastri. 16th, Nico Hülkenberg. So really good qualifying for Hülkenberg, got into Q3. His fastest lap after the first run's gone to 6th. I don't know where he would have finished, but unfortunately it was deleted for track limits. Race was not as good for Hülkenberg. The race pace of the Haas car doesn't look very good. And for Hülkenberg, he of course got that 5-second penalty for going over track limits too many times. So not a great day for Hülkenberg. Number 15, I have Kevin Magnussen. So for Kevin Magnussen, very similar situation to his teammate. Even though he didn't get out-qualified very heavily by Hülkenberg, I do try to put more emphasis on Sunday because that's when the points are scored. And for Magnussen, I think he got the most out of the car. He beat Hülkenberg on track, despite finishing much higher. He didn't have that clumsy incident, which I forgot to mention, with Ocon at turn 4 on the first lap, and he just kind of kept it clean and didn't get any penalties. Number 14, Carlos Sainz. So for Sainz, I think even though he finished 4th, I don't think he had a great weekend. He was out-qualified by Charles Leclerc by a decent margin, and then in the race he was basically nowhere. Leclerc was out fighting Perez. I think Leclerc was never going to beat Perez, but there was a massive margin between himself and his teammate. And of course he was beaten by Alonso, which I don't think his teammate would have been if Leclerc hadn't had that reliability issue. And he was, I think, lucky to stay ahead of Hamilton. Number 13, Logan Sargent. So for Sargent, I think a really solid, really good opening weekend. I know he was beaten by his teammate both in the qualifying and in the race, but still kept it clean, was really good. Had really solid race pace, which I was really surprised by, because usually that's the thing that takes the longest time for rookies to learn. Really good race pace. Number 12, George Russell. So for Russell, a bit of an odd weekend. He out-qualifies Hamilton, but then has, I think, a pretty poor race by his standards. Basically gained positions on the start, and was ahead of both Astons, but then loses positions to both Astons. I think he burned through his tires a bit too quickly at the start of the race, and then just didn't have the tire management to stay ahead, and ended up 7th behind Stroll. So not a great race by Russell. 11th, I have Lando Norris. So for Norris, it's really hard to tell. I think he got the most out of the car in qualifying, couldn't do any better than that. But then in the race, of course, the car was awful. It was not particularly fast, and the reliability was absolutely awful. He had 6 pit stops that race, and yeah, but of course it's really hard to judge how good Norris was because of that, right? So I think for now 11th is good. Number 10, Yuki Tsunoda. So Tsunoda, really good start to the season, I thought. Out-qualified De Vries really well by a good margin and looked pretty solid in the race, no incidents. Got a couple good overtakes and was very close to a point-scoring finish. And I think this year points are going to be very important. So just being consistent and being at the top of kind of the back 6 teams is going to be your best chance of getting points. Number 9, Lance Stroll. So I think for Stroll, I would under normal circumstances, I would have him lower down on this list. But because he missed all of testing, which was at Bahrain, so all of the other drivers had a massive advantage on experience with these cars at this track. And also because he's coming off of injury, I think 6th place was probably the best case scenario. Yes, I know he was out-qualified heavily by Alonso, but I thought the race was pretty good. He got a good overtake on Russell and brought it home for 6th place, and that's really probably the most that the team could have hoped for. Number 8, Lewis Hamilton. So for Hamilton, I think not amazing qualifying, was out-qualified by Russell, but race was much better than Russell in the race. I think he probably could have gotten 4th place. I think if he had been maybe a bit more aggressive with maybe an overtake or preserved his tires a little better, maybe he could have gotten 4th place, but it's really hard to tell. I expected the Mercedes in race pace to be better than the Ferraris, but they seem to be very close to equal. So number 7, Sergio Perez. So for Perez, yes, I know he qualifies second, finishes second, but he still was much slower than his teammate, of course, but he did the best. He did what was expected of him, brought the car home in 2nd place. Number 6, Pierre Gasly. So I think after an absolute nightmare of a race, of a qualifying, gets knocked out of Q1 because his fastest laps were deleted. That was a really excellent drive by Gasly today. It goes from P20 to P9, showing that I think the Alpine had really solid pace this weekend in Bahrain. And I think for Gasly, I think he's just going to want to keep doing that week in, week out. And of course, for Gasly, was much better than his teammate Esteban Ocon on Sunday. Saturday was a different story, but overall really solid for Gasly. Number 5, Valtteri Bottas. So for Bottas, I think really good, decent qualifying. Maybe I think could have gotten into Q3, but really excellent race for him. Best of the rest, as we're going to call it this year. 8th place was, I think, 15-ish seconds behind Russell, but was well clear of everyone else and was even racing some of the cars ahead in the early part of the race, and beat his teammate Zhou Guanyu by a pretty good margin. Number 4, Alex Albon. So for Albon, qualified well, or qualified his teammate, got well into the Q3, and not in Q3, Q2. So he was in that 11 to 15 range, and then just had a really solid race and brought the car home for 10th place, which could be absolutely gold for Williams this year. So overall, fantastic race for Albon. Number 3, Charles Leclerc. So for Leclerc, I think the fact that he had a chance for pole and then didn't go for a second lap in qualifying because they thought they were too far off the Red Bull, and then to even be fighting Perez at the start, even though I know he was overtaken, but to be in that position was, I think, fantastic for Leclerc. And I think it was just extremely unfortunate with the reliability issue that the car had, and obviously not his fault. Number 2, Fernando Alonso. So probably a dream start for Alonso's career at Aston Martin. Qualifies 5th. I think maybe the car could have gone a little higher in qualifying, it's hard to say, but the race was flawless. Got some absolutely amazing overtakes done on Russell, Hamilton, and Sainz. The latter 2 on Hamilton and Sainz were in such unconventional places as well. Hamilton at turn 10 and Sainz at turn 11. And it's very rare that we see overtakes in F1 at those corners. And his pace was fantastic all weekend. So overall for Alonso, number 2. So number 1 is, of course, race winner Max Verstappen. Gets pole by a pretty solid margin, maybe a bit smaller than you would expect against Perez, but in the race was masterful. Just took the lead, controlled it from the start, and he was even being told by his race engineer to slow down. So I think that shows how much pace in hand the Red Bulls have. So there you go. So that's the first power rankings of the 2023 F1 season. Please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. How would you rank the drivers after the first race of the season? If you enjoyed the video, please hit like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you for watching.